On the sixth day of Christmas, my Bridget brought to me a meditation on the cycles of time. Because this month we have an odd moon. We have 2 new moons in 1 month, which is actually quite rare. This one feels particularly interestingly timed in that it's right as we're starting to think about the beginning of the secular new year and everything that's been going on. And yeah, I want to talk about time and how we perceive it, think about it, and really, hopefully not, but often ruminate on it today as we walk together down creation's path. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christo-Pagan druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian, and I'm a geese laying 5 golden rings.
Oh, my. It has been a weird and wacky year, and as we are getting closer to the turning of the secular year, I have so many feels. And as we're, for the second time in 1 month, right here in the middle of the 12 days of Christmas, getting to have yet another meditation on the Via-Negativa, the second path, the path of letting go and letting be, the path of pain and sorrow and spaciousness and openness and
The path of mystery.
histories. Yeah, it feels oddly appropriate going into the new year to have this kind of pause right before New Year's Eve. I don't know what the future holds, but I think a lot of us are thinking about it way more than we normally would because of, let's just say, circumstances. But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever app you're listening to us on. We do original Christo-Pagan and Druid content 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And right now, during the 12 days of Christmas, we're doing a new episode every day. So you don't want to miss anything because we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. So let's just get into it, shall we? I kind of have hazy shade of winter stuck in my head right now for those opening lines of time. I think a lot of us are thinking about cycles and how things repeat, how things change, and how things stay the same. And for those of us who have adopted a more pagan calendar, this is a pattern that we've kind of gotten used to because we go through this cycle of approximately every 6 weeks celebrating a holiday. A big festival shows up. We just had Yule. We're now already starting to think about Imbolc and what we want to do for Imbolc. So we're already thinking of spring and what's going to come with it. We're used to these ideas of cycles and this kind of ever-spinning wheel. For those of us who practice more in the Irish and Celtic traditions, we are used to wheels instead of wheels instead of wheels instead of wheels. Because it's not just one cycle. We have our devotional cycle. We have, which is tied more to the deities. That's the 4 fire festivals. And we also have the wheel of the year, which is tied to the sun. And the solar festivals, we have the lunar festivals that are tied to the phases of the moon. They go by every month. Some of us, especially those of us who practice planetary magic, are looking at the cycle of the week and how the planets revolve through it. For those who are really into planetary magic, they're looking at the cycle of the day. It's wheels on top of wheels on top of wheels. I honestly don't know who said it because I've seen the quote attributed to several different people. So that's why I'm not attributed it to any one person. But history itself tends not to repeat, but it does tend to rhyme. I think a lot of us are feeling that right now with what's going on in Gaza, Ukraine, and the Sahara, what's going on in Germany, France, the United States. I could keep naming countries, but I feel like that would be the rest of the episode, is just naming all the countries where we're seeing these cycles pop around again. For us here in the United States, I feel like we're heading towards another Andrew Jackson administration, which does not fill me with any kind of joy or glee. I feel like we should have a day on our calendar dedicated to Andrew Jackson in the same way the British celebrate Bonfire Night. Like, let's have a moment and talk about the guy who tried to burn our country down, to Andrew Jackson. And so I'm seeing a lot of think pieces, a lot of discussion discourse, digging into these cycles, these repetitions. What does this mean? And where are we? Well, I think a lot of that is fruitful. At the same time, it's important to remember that history rhymes. Cycles don't exactly repeat. In fact, we've noticed this in our own lives. We have kind of a 15-year, a 7-year, and a 3-year cycle that we go through, where certain events seem to repeat, echo. Maybe echo is a better word.
Yeah, definitely in parallel.
But they're not the same. They're never the same. And the solutions are not the same. It's not, as too often gets said for instances like this, unresolved issues resurfacing. I don't think the problems that we're having in our country, for example, are unresolved issues. They're issues that keep changing. They're new issues picking up old causes. They're problems that are just persistent and possibly just endemic. If we're going to have any hopes of moving through and getting out of some of these cycles, I think one of the first things that we have to do is learn to let go of our preconceived notions about them. That can be really hard. Try not to name names for certain things just because I feel like we'll get lost in specifics and lose the greater point.
That's one of the tricks that I like to keep in mind when I'm thinking about the phrase history repeats itself, because it is in parallel. A maple tree, an oak tree, mahogany, and all that. When you zoom out far enough, it's a tree. It's all a tree. It's basically repeated itself. But as you zoom in, it's a tree, and we don't want to get lost in the trees for the forest, or lose the forest for the trees.
Because what's really going on right now, writ large, is a problem that was created during the Industrial Revolution that we haven't found good solutions for yet. And so we're in these cycles of, how about this? How about that? How about this? How about that? And because we've been kind of trying to patch a boat while doing this transoceanic voyage, we've lost sight of the original problems and are just fixated on patching the holes as we find them.
Not only that, but because of the advances in technology and the fact that we've already moved into a whole other age.
Yeah.
Some of the parts of the boat are basically modern tech, like plastics and polymers and stuff, that other parts are wood. And we're like depending what section of the boat people are working on, they might be working on stuff that's already no longer relevant anymore.
The normal human development cycle got interrupted prior to the industrial age with the advent of the printing press. So we've talked about that before, but it's hard to express exactly how much that messed everyone up. Just because now all of a sudden information can be disseminated quicker, easier, and with far less expense. And then with industrialization, we have our first mass migrations and attempts at homogenizing populations, getting people to all feel like they are part of one monoculture. And this is part of the rise of nationalism. This is part of the rise of this new kind of identity that's coming out. People aren't identifying with their families as much because we're moving out. We're moving to the cities from the rural areas. We're moving to wherever the work is. So that those tight-knit family connections aren't as prevalent in our lives as they once were. We're developing different relationships in that the churches aren't as strong as they are. So humans are going to worship something. And if we could get most people on Earth to realize one truth about humanity, humans are going to worship something.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean they necessarily have to worship the same thing that I do, but realize we're going to worship something, whether that's the state, whether that's a celebrity, whether that's a deity, a spirit, whether that's ourselves in
the
sports ball team. Like, it is the nature of human beings to have a focus of worship and devotion.
Even the most devout atheists generally worship nihilism, the nothingness of it all. And most of the time they don't. But
I've met a few, yeah.
I've met a few. And one of my fun games is going, oh, so you're an atheist, but yet you have a God.
Well, that's the thing. Humans are God-creating machines.
Yeah.
In the absence of a particular faith, that could be, like I said, the sports ball team. That could be a fiction fandom that somebody falls into, a political group that somebody falls into. We are meaning-seeking beings, and we're going to try to find that meaning wherever we can. And that's why this cycle is as fraught as it is, because with the disruptions that we had with the printing press, we start doubting the divine right of kings. We start doubting the absolute power of the church. We start doubting these things. And so that devotion has to flow somewhere. And this is where nation states come in and start claiming that devotion for themselves, which leads us to World War One, which was just a pageant of, it's the 100 Years' War, but instead of fighting over which brand of Christianity is right, it's arguing over weird nationalistic stories that were very young when they were originally told, which kind of makes everybody start questioning nationalism a little bit, which gives rise to ultra-nationalism, and we have the Second World War. We're fighting, and have been fighting this whole time, over meta-narratives, the grand stories that we tell each other. And after the Second World War, we get all enlightened and postmodern and decide that meta-narratives don't exist. They're bad. They led to the Second World War. So we're not going to have them anymore. We're going to deconstruct them all. And so we do. We deconstruct all of them. And if there's one truth that I can get out there, everyone is postmodern now, especially those who argue mostly against postmodernism. They do so with a postmodern toolbox. But in that deconstruction, a vacuum is created. Something is going to come in and fill that vacuum, whether it's a resurgence of ultranationalism, whether it is a resurgence of ethno-nationalism, whether it is a resurgence of religious nationalism, which I know in our country, we are very focused on Christian nationalism here, but we can see this in the Hindu nationalism and other religious-based nationalisms that we're seeing arise around the world. Something will rise to take its place. And this is the grand cycle that we're stuck in. This is the cycle that we're repeating. And it's not a bad cycle. It's just one that we haven't figured out a working solution to yet. Because the divine right of kings was obviously weird. We've talked about this before, that the idea that holy divine fish people were blessed by God so that they could rule all of us with an iron fist is a weird idea. And once you realize it's a weird idea, you're not going back to this weird idea. Once you see the emperor has no clothes, the emperor has no clothes, and you can't get yourself to believe that the emperor has clothes again, right? And we're stuck in the cycle of, well, how about this? No, okay. Well, how about this? No, how about this? And that breeds a certain amount of uncertainty that most people are uncomfortable with, even though it is the natural state of our species. And I say that because you can look back at the literature from hundreds of years ago with the cloud of unknowing. You go back 100 years before that. You go back 100 years before that. You can see this cycle happening in the Roman Senate and the various letters and stuff that were going back and forth all the way back then. You can see this in writings that go back even further into the earlier cuneiform writings. This is an argument that we've been having forever. The question is, how can we get more people okay with uncertainty? That really is the question. If we want to break this cycle, to me, this is where the Buddha's brilliance comes in. Buddhism is, one day a guy was meditating under a tree and went, I will never absolutely know anything. And that's okay.
And maybe everybody should be okay with knowing and also not knowing. Yeah.
Enlightenment. It's a reductive view of the Buddha, and I get that. But when you look at Buddhism, it is at its heart this idea of it's kind of okay that we don't know everything. That's fine. We don't know. I don't know. You don't know. We may never know. It's okay.
This, for me, is where, especially in the context of this cycle, that really becomes more profound, especially for an answer and a way to help break free of that cycle, is this acceptance of more of that middle path. Acceptance that there is no one answer for all people. Because right now, we watched the fight of religious worship, and we watched the fight of nationalism worship. And these cycles have gotten faster and faster And so then those two then fought with the worship of the corporation. But then as people were betrayed by that, they then went, well, no, religion again. And no, money. You should just worship money. Greed is good. We got our 80s. And religion came back in, and nationalism. And now you had money, corporation, religion, nationalism. And then you have this self. Oh, no, actually, the answer is just worship yourself because F everybody else. Because actually, yourself is what's most important. And so now you have self, religion, and as it speeds up more and more and more. The answer is, well, for some, maybe this, some maybe that, recognizing that both and recognizing there's probably a middle way, having that balance.
This is one of the reasons why I have been talking a lot more about chaos magic and like Liber Null and the basic ideas that are woven into there, because between that idea of paradigm shifting and Tolkien's idea of secondary beliefs, I think that is this meta-modern future that we're heading towards. I think that is this new way of understanding the world where I can have these secondary beliefs that I'm not going to go to war over. I'm not going to fight over them. When I'm talking about my spiritual experiences, for example, I will not know until I die if I've been involved in a protracted active imagination practice or if I have actually communed with spirits through ritual work or not. I can have feels about that. I can feel as certain as I want to about that. But classifying all of that in this kind of secondary belief of, but I will never know for sure.
We've seen and can learn from these previous cycles over and over again. The absolutism is the wrong answer.
Yes.
Every time they got to absolutism, there was a lot of death and suffering, and it was bad. So we know not that answer.
And see, that's where this becomes really tricky, because original sin is a flawed way of looking at things. And so I'm very tempted to say the original sin of the modern era is certainty. But I don't want to go back to an original sin, fall, so our fall was when we decided certainty was the thing that we wanted to have, and our redemption is the rejection of certainty. Because you know what? There are certain things that I am certain about. Certainty is not always bad, but certainty, like all things, like this is what science should have brought us. This is where the Enlightenment went wrong, and why I'm constantly like badgering the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment brought us rationalism, which is this idea that as long as we're cold and detached and use reason, we can solve any problem. And that's not true. We need to have our emotions involved. We need to have our cultural understandings involved. There are a lot of things beyond reason that need to be brought into the discussion. That's why the Enlightenment was hundreds of years ago, and we haven't solved all of our problems yet.
Even when you look at some of what we claimed as the greatest thinkers of time, there were times where Einstein just went, I don't know, just because. And,
there's a cosmological constant.
There's a cosmological constant. Yeah, because there isn't the falsity that certainty is. There are times of certainty and times of not.
But I don't want to get into a new fall redemption model, because certainty is not the problem. Rationalism was not the problem. Disenchantment was not the problem. They were all problems, but the answer to disenchantment is not to return to a superstitious magical thinking where, oh, the crops failed, let's go burn a witch. These aren't either or problems. They're very much both and problems. That's where trying to find a way to make it easier for people to understand there are some ideas, some belief systems, some ways of interacting with the world where you just pick up the beliefs for a while and then put them back down. Then pick them up again and then put them back down. That's okay. That we need to be seeking less certainty and more a vibrant toolkit that will help us get through, because I think in each one of these cycles, we found something true about us. And we decided, oh, we found something true. It is the only truth. And we became very hyper-focused on it. Nations were a mistake. How do we organize ourselves without them?
Yeah.
A meta-narrative is going to come in.
Money caused lots of problems, but it also solved a lot of problems. So you can't just get rid of it, but you can't,
This is where we're going to have to really change the way we think about thinking if we're going to actually escape any of the cycles that we're in.
Part of that in metamodernism is that journey between both. And this is part of that journey of seeing the cycles and seeing your own journey. I just wanted to share for a minute a neat little story from this past Advent season. For me, Advent was going to be about preparing for Christmas. So all throughout the month of December, in my interactions with individuals, one of the questions that would come up, especially somebody who was very stressed, was, are you ready for Christmas? I would watch other people tense and stress when hearing that question. I must have seemed like some kind of super enlightened guru because the answer was always yes. It didn't matter that I was done. Like if Christmas had happened that next moment, no, I wasn't ready for that next moment. But Christmas wasn't happening for weeks, sometimes when that question was asked, or days, because it didn't matter. It was all that journey of preparing for Christmas. So having that both and thinking for me and knowing I was on that cycle, yes, I'm ready because I'm on the journey. Merely starting the moment I played and watched Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special and sang along to a lovely song, I started my journey on Christmas and was now ready for Christmas, even though I still spent 4 weeks in preparation of it.
This is why I think it's so valuable for those of us who practice multiple calendars, which is, by the way, an old tradition. Most cultures have a secular and a religious calendar. That's an old thing. But it teaches us this very valuable thing that I don't want to say only now talking about, but that is so much of the discussion now, this learning to oscillate. Because sometimes I'm on the religious calendar, sometimes I'm on the secular calendar. I'm always on both, but my attention goes back and forth. So when we were getting ready for Samhain, we were talking about the new year. And here we are heading towards January, and we're talking about the new year. 2 New Years a year, woo! But that's important because it reminds us to escape this either or. Because it's not either the pagan New Year or the secular January New Year. It's both. And they mean something different. So it helps us with this both and, this oscillation back and forth. My Samhain New Year's is different from my New Year's Eve New Year's. One is spent connecting to my ancestors, connecting to my tradition, connecting to my guides, guardians, and gods. The other is connecting to the future, what's coming up with friends, family, various celebrations and whatnot, right? They're different. They serve different purposes. They're both a New Year's. Neither, for me, is the New Year's. And I found myself writing this a lot in a lot of things that I've been writing lately, this difference between and the, which is a distinction that some languages don't have. I'm not saying that that's a problem. It's just I don't know how to say this in a way that's more universal than where I'm at in this kind of trapped in this Germanic English grammar.
Speaking of New Year's and people thinking about New Year's resolutions, one of the common ones is, I'm going to go on the diet or a diet, depending on where their thinking is. And it's really important first to sit back and remember the diet, generally speaking,
Let's
for
be
people's
honest,
health.
we pronounce this word differently. A lot of us English speakers, and I don't think we realize that we do it, where we have the diet
The diet.
and the diet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. We even go the and the.
We have two different versions of the specific article that's not just the or the. The is the thing. It's this absolute, definite, that one. It's kind of stronger than that because we kind of have a, which is just, a thing that's out there. We have the thing, which is more specific. We have that thing, which is more specific. And then we have the thing, which is even more specific. Like we've created this huge spectrum in our language that I don't think that we've realized. And we keep getting stuck on, oh, this is the thing. This is the diet.
Yeah. The thing is the diet, nutritionists are coming around to the point of what was covered more than 2,000 years ago by the Buddha. It should be balanced. It should be that middle way with some adjustments based on personal biological needs for the individual. And a diet is the thing that you're presently eating and being able to oscillate between the two, because this way, even though you may have your New Year's resolution to eat healthier, and a lot of people end up going more extreme because they end up going to that absolutist, well, I'm going to pick up this very unhealthy dietary eating habits or this very unhealthy dietary eating habits, instead of recognizing like, well, it should be balanced. It should then be structured to their biological needs. And then that is a diet. There's also a diet that of what they ate that day. And that day may be closer to the diet that they're looking for and not, but it's all a journey and there's going to be give and take.
This is all of what we're thinking about as the calendar is turning, as we're in this place of I'm wanting to break the cycles in that I want us to realize that we're on more than one at a time and really centering ourselves into this oscillation of, am I a person of faith? That's a definitive statement. Yes. And most of the time, I am very rooted in my faith. And there are some times where those roots get a little detached and I'm floating around a bit. It's okay to oscillate, to realize that everything is on a spectrum. I know we want absolutes. I know we want definitives. I know we want everything to be in this binary black or white, good, bad, positive, negative. I'm reading a book right now that I saw some reviews of on Blue Sky called Queer Kabbalah. That is a lot of things that I've thought over the years, but not put into words. And just really coming to terms and to grips with this idea of spectra, that everything is on a spectrum, that everything is not as tied to the terminology that we're using, and to question the terminology that we're using and how we're using it and what the greater ramifications of it is. And that can be scary for some people. And I think that's really the cycle that we're in right now. Because yes, certainty is a nice thing. But here's the problem with certainty. You only have certainty in a fatalistic universe. Certainty only exists if all of the outcomes are predetermined. And I know we could get into a whole argument over free will. Even if free will is an illusion, that's not how we experience it. Our experience of the world is one of choice, of decision. Our experience of the world is one where we wake up and decide what to do. We put a lot of strictures on ourselves of, I have to go to work. You don't have to go to work. You maybe should go to work or ought to go to work, but you don't have to. This is where this determinism, this certainty starts really harming us, when we have turned these cycles into inevitabilities. And I don't think any cycle is an inevitability. Inertia is a thing. Once you get a certain amount of speed going in a certain direction, it can take a lot of energy to change the course because you have quite a few forces acting on you to keep moving in the direction that you're currently moving in.
But even inertia puts forward the possibility of change.
Yes.
It can happen.
And that's, I think, the great truth that we're all struggling with right now. I'd love to know what you guys are thinking about all this. I know a lot of our episodes are kind of open-ended, and this one maybe more than most, because I think that's the point of this one, is to be much more open-ended, like no certainty, certainty bad, except for when it's not. And when it's not, it's realizing that it's not definitive certainty, it's just provisional. It's just a secondary belief that you just pick up and put down.
I like to think of it like a climbing spike. I've driven it into the rock. It'll help me get to the next point in elevation, but it also comes back out when it needs to.
Yeah. But I'd love to know how you're thinking about the various cycles that we're currently living through and all of the changes and stuff that go along with it. If you're listening to us on YouTube or Spotify, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say that you can leave a comment, they won't let us know, so we won't know. So you can leave a comment there, because engagement is magic, but then head over to creationspath.com, click on chat, and we will get notified and be able to reply to you there. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars that you can pass our way, think about maybe joining a membership. We have both annual and monthly memberships available over there. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am C.E. That money really does go a long way to help us keep on the table, a roof over our heads, and the power on. Thank you to everybody who does that. Y'all are amazing. Thank you so very much. As we are heading out today, I feel like the only proper prayer, O Cerridwen, who shows us the great cycles of life, from the seeking of the awen to the brewing of it, to the quest for revenge against Gwion for having stolen it from you, to giving birth to Taliesin, to casting him adrift in the sea. You show us the great cycles of life, as like the moon, you rise and fall, wax and wane. Help us to navigate the great cycles of our lives. Amen.
Amen. And a partridge in a pear tree.